All right, cool.
That was hot.
All right, let me just get all the jokes out of my system. Okay, they're out. We're good.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about the military-industrial complex, and my phone just went off, so I have to redo that.
All right, we got this thing.
All right, today we're doing the military-industrial complex. Me and my accomplice here, Nick, we're going to be having a nice, wholesome discussion about it. So, I guess for this huge topic that not a lot of people have heard the term, but like they don't really know what it means. Where do you kind of want to start with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a great place to start is just with a general definition, because when I was talking with people about doing this, a lot of them came back to me and said, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so the military-industrial complex is a phenomenon that was first popularized by former five-star General Dwight D. Eisenhower in his farewell address from his presidency. And it's when the military and the defense industry work together as a vested interest in a country, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's kind of a win-win. I mean, you know, military gets more weapons to fight their wars, and the companies, well, they get to make money off the wars.
Yeah. So this speech was, 1961 for a year, so kind of one of the higher points of the Cold War, and so he really had that warning. And so I guess 50 years later, do you think we're still firmly within that military-industrial complex?
I think we do have things to worry about here, because he mentioned in his speech that until the latest, and I'm going to quote him here, until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry.
Mm-hmm.
Right? American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well, but we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. And in that, he's kind of referencing the fact that after Korea, we didn't de-escalate like we did in all the other conflicts.
Yeah. From my research, there's kind of like 3 different eras that the United States has gone through with the military-industrial complex. With like the first 140-something years where we kind of built up as we went to war. And then, like you said with Korea, we just kept it up at that. We kept the machine going rather than de-escalating it, which I think is a really interesting choice.
I mean, if you think about the geopolitical issues of the time, though, I mean, you have the USSR right there, and this is right when we start going, maybe we should be more interventionist in our international policy, and that's a big deal, and we're going to come back to that. I know for sure later is America's interventionism, because that is a huge aspect of this whole topic. One thing I found interesting, though, when I was looking into this, something that I had never heard of, was the military-industrial congressional complex. And so what this idea does is it takes the military-industrial complex, something that I knew about, that Eisenhower warned us about, and adds Congress to the mix.
So kind of like a triangle of Congress, defense companies, and then the Pentagon, which is funding all of this. Okay.
Yeah. So the idea being, and why it makes sense to me, is that you have Congress, and what's their job? Their job is to declare war and to allocate budget. Those are 2 really important key things. Well, they get lobbied by the defense contractors. So the defense contractors pay Congress. Congress then goes and makes sure that the military budget is bigger. The military then gives out contracts to those defense contractors, so they make more money, so they have more money to lobby. And then Congress also can just declare war at any time to make the military useful.
Yeah, but the thing is, I don't think Congress is going to declare war, and we've kind of moved past that era, if you know what it... Because what it does is, they don't want to give the president too much power. And once they declare war, the president has all the power. So I think we're kind of in that era, we don't declare war anymore, we have war on big general topics. Like look at the war on drugs, the war on terror, where we kind of have a blank check written for these conflicts.
Yeah, I mean, look at this year. Trump is proposed to increase defense spending by 14% from 2018, and he's doing it with no justification. Like, that's a first in American history. That's a huge deal. Is that we are generally, the buildup has always happened right before a conflict, and all of a sudden he's just saying, you know what, well, let's increase the budget, but he has no Persian Gulf like Bush did. He has no Iraq like the second Bush did.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have the USSR like Reagan did, where Reagan was trying to basically bankrupt the USSR at one point.
Yeah.
He has no purpose for spending this extra money, and yet he's allocating another $60 billion in 1 year. It's a 14% increase.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And this kind of goes into something that I know a lot of people love to talk about, which is how much the United States does spend on their military and how that can be looked at as a problem. And I think that's one of the first things that I kind of want to talk about is do we spend too much on defense? And it is, what comes from that, because what's the goal of our military, right? It's to provide a safer and more prosperous America.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that?
Yeah, I would say that. And I know the statistic you're probably going to pull out. The one that everyone pulls out is our defense budget compared to the next 10 countries or the next 13, depending on which year you look at. I know 2016 was probably the most we've spent, and then the number's gone just a little bit down since then. But yeah, we spend a lot of money on defense.
We do.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you're not super opposed to it. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
This is probably where me and you are going to kind of divert. I don't see too much of an issue of it, because a lot of that technology that is used in the military is eventually dispersed to the civilian world. You can look at like GPS, which originally was a military, just for military. But it's something that's super important in our world today. You can look at even the internet, which was supposed to be just for military and then was expanded upon in the world. And so I think bringing those technologies has been like kind of a blessing to our world. It's kind of formed it into what it is today. And you can see really military influences all around the United States. You can look at fashion. I know there's a lot of camo out and yeah. I know like Adidas released something and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. It's really military-like. And then a lot of the shoes, they look like military boots, which I think is really interesting as like a United States military culture type thing. It's like how ingrained we are with defense and all that. But of course, you want to talk about the budget and where that's going.
Yeah, but no, you're saying though that you think that the advances that the military's made through all this spending have benefited society. So you'd say it's worth the money we put in.
Yeah, it's almost created just a new market, because you know for certain if you market something to the United States military, they're going to pay just a little bit more for it, which kind of encourages companies to do their own research and development, which some argue is benefiting, but others argue is why the United States is lagging behind in technology, because the military isn't doing R&D anymore. They're giving it to private companies in hopes that they'll do it for them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then I'm guessing, you'd say, and this is a very valid point, that all this defense spending we do, there is one positive side to it, most definitely, and that is all the jobs that it creates.
Mm-hmm.
We create a ton of jobs in the private sector with the money we spend on the military. That is a fact.
Yeah. Kind of a dark side to that, though, creating all the jobs. You can look at, like, when we do want to eventually bring that budget down, it's going to be really, really hard because, again, we're all intertangled with Congress and defense contractors. And so there's some bases that I know should be shut down, like they're useless. Like, let's look at, I know I think, the Midwest, there's 2 C-130 bases 30 minutes apart from each other. That's no time in flying time. One of them is useless. But we can't shut them down because Congress has the constituents and towns depend on the bases for an economy. So once that base is gone, then there's no economy in that town and people are jobless. So it's kind of, we just have to keep increasing in, which isn't sustainable.
Yeah, it's not sustainable, and that's, a great point in that, the Congressional Budget Office, the nonpartisan government agency that does tons and tons of research on our budget and projections for our economic future. I mean, I was looking, in 10 years, they say that we're expected to double our deficit, or not our debt, our debt
Mm-hmm.
of $14 trillion to over almost $29 trillion.
Big number.
It's a huge number. It's a number that completely boggles the mind. you know, I think a lot of people don't realize how big a trillion truly is, and even I don't fully, but if you take 1,000,000 and then you take 1,000,000 times, that's 1 trillion.
Yeah. It's a huge number and it's ungraspable at this point. And I think because numbers like that just are thrown around constantly, we have a nation have become pretty number numb.
Yeah. I mean, one number though that is important is the fact that that debt will be 92% of our GDP.
Yeah.
And what that is that's really important because your GDP kind of gives you an idea of how likely you are to repay it. But bringing that back to the military, when we're looking at our current budget, you know, we're looking at that deficit of $984 billion expected this year, according to the official White House budget. $652 billion is going to be in defense spending, right? A lot of people love to bring up the 52% of our budget is military. That's not quite true. It's 52% of our discretionary budget, which is very different, but it's still 15% of what we're spending as a country is on defense spending. You know, and then we look at something like education. You know, we consider education to be a foundational part of our democracy, of our republic.
Yeah.
Right? Our representative democracy, I guess is the best way to put it. And we are actually this year, under Trump's budget, we are going to decrease education spending by 10% to $60 billion. We're literally spending 10 times as much money, actually almost 11 times as much money on our military as we are on educating our citizens.